The sky over Earth was clear, but the peace was shattered when the alien fleet arrived. They were the Xalarians, a race with technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Their ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning, massive and powerful. The people of Earth didn't know it yet, but their world was about to change forever. Captain Mike stood on the observation deck of Earth's Central Command, staring at the incoming alien ships. His hands were clenched behind his back, trying to keep calm, but his heart raced. The Xalarian ships looked like black mountains, floating silently in space. He had heard of their arrival from the government, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. "They've arrived," Lieutenant Emma said beside him, her voice steady, though her eyes showed the same worry he felt. "What now?" Captain Mike turned toward her. "We fight," he said simply. "We do what we must." The Xalarians had sent a message before they arrived. It was short and to the point. "Humans are weak. Your planet is ours now. Submit or face destruction." That was all. Earth's leaders tried to respond with threats, but they knew deep down that the Xalarians were not to be taken lightly. The Xalarian fleet was too powerful, their weapons too advanced. Despite their best efforts, Earth's defenses were no match for the alien ships. In the blink of an eye, Earth's major military bases were destroyed. Cities across the planet were attacked without warning. The air buzzed with the sound of explosions. People screamed as they ran through the streets, desperately trying to escape. On the ground, chaos spread quickly. Soldiers and civilians alike were thrown into panic. The government scrambled to organize some kind of defense, but it was clear that humanity was outmatched. "Sir, the Xalarian fleet is moving toward the major cities," reported Lieutenant Emma, watching the displays on her console. "We're losing control over Earth's defenses. It's happening faster than we expected." "We need to act," Captain Mike said, his voice firm. He turned toward Dr. Josh, a scientist who had been working on new military technology. "Any ideas?" Dr. Josh, standing near the back of the room, adjusted his glasses and looked at the data. I don't know. The Xalarian ships are using some kind of shield we've never seen before. Our weapons can't break through it." Captain Mike took a deep breath. The situation was dire. What if we used a different approach? We don't have the power to match them head-on, but maybe we can find a way to hit them where it hurts. Lieutenant Emma looked at the data again. "You mean like a surprise attack?" Captain Mike nodded. "Exactly. We might be able to create some kind of distraction. Give us time to figure out a real plan. But we'll need to move fast. I don't think we have much time before they strike again." As Earth's military forces scrambled to respond, civilians were caught in the chaos. People ran for their lives, trying to find shelter as the first of the Xalarian ships began firing down on cities. The sky was lit up with flashes of light as buildings crumbled under the attack. The streets became rivers of panic as people desperately tried to escape. Captain Mike knew that Earth was losing, but he refused to give in. He stood tall, knowing that it wasn't just about the military. It was about humanity's survival. It was about the future of their children, their families, their way of life. "We won't let them take our planet," Captain Mike said, determination rising in his voice. "Prepare the fleet. We fight back, no matter the cost." Earth was burning. The Xalarian fleet had devastated the planet's cities, and the damage was catastrophic. Every attempt by Earth's forces to fight back had been crushed. But amidst the chaos, something remarkable was happening. People weren't giving up. Humanity's spirit was far stronger than the invaders had expected. Captain Mike stood in the war room, his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him. It showed the damage from the latest attack. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble, and millions of lives were lost. Yet there was still a spark of hope. Earth was not entirely broken. They still had a chance to fight. "Sir," Lieutenant Emma said, her voice low but determined, "we've been getting reports from all over the world. People are organizing. It's not just the military anymore. Civilians, engineers, even scientists. Everyone is coming together to fight back. They want to help. Captain Mike looked up, his eyes narrowing with focus. We need to form a resistance, he said. A proper, organized force. We can't rely on anyone else. It's up to us. Dr. Josh, standing beside them, nodded. The Calarians might have the technology, but we have something they don't. Resourcefulness. I've been looking at their weapon systems. We might be able to create a countermeasure if we can get our hands on the right tech. We need to move quickly, Captain Mike said, clenching his fists. We've lost too much already. We can't afford to wait any longer. Around the globe, Earth's military leaders began to work together, combining their remaining forces to form what would become known as the Vengeance Fleet. It wasn't a huge fleet by Xalarian standards, but it was a start. People from all walks of life joined the cause. Engineers worked around the clock to repair damaged ships, civilians formed defense groups, and retired military officers came out of hiding to lend their expertise. In one corner of the world, Alex, a former naval strategist, had been living a quiet life away from the battlefield. But when the Xalarians attacked, everything changed. He couldn't stand by and watch as his planet was destroyed. He joined the resistance, helping to organize tactical strategies for the fight ahead. We've got to hit them where it hurts, Alex said to his team. We won't be able to defeat them head-on with their superior tech, but we can use guerrilla tactics. Disrupt their operations. Cause chaos. Meanwhile, in a hidden underground lab, Rachel, a young engineer, worked on something that could change the course of the war. She was only a recent graduate, but her mind was brilliant. She had an idea, a way to adapt some of the alien technology they had salvaged. If they could build a weapon that could weaken the Xalarian shields, it might give humanity a fighting chance. I don't know if this will work, Rachel muttered to herself as she adjusted the wires. But if it does, we'll have an advantage. In secret bases and military outposts around the world, humanity's best and brightest were working together. There was no room for failure. Each day the Xalarian fleet stayed in orbit. More lives were lost. Each day without action meant more destruction. Back in the command center, Captain Mike received word from Alex's team. We've been getting reports of successful sabotage missions. A few Xalarian supply lines have been disrupted. They're starting to notice. Good, Captain Mike said, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Every victory, no matter how small, matters. We need to keep up the pressure. Lieutenant Emma stood beside him, looking at the team's progress. This is just the beginning, right? It has to be, Captain Mike replied. We might be outnumbered, but they underestimated us. Humanity doesn't give up easily. We're stronger than they think. As Earth's resistance began to grow, so did the will to fight. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about showing the Xalarians that Earth wasn't a weak, defenseless planet to be conquered. Humanity had a strength they hadn't seen before, a strength that was born out of unity, determination, and the will to protect everything they held dear. Captain Mike looked out the window, seeing the night sky filled with the looming presence of the Xalarian ships. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but he also knew one thing for sure. Earth wasn't done fighting yet. The Vengeance Fleet had begun, and it was only a matter of time before they struck back. The resistance had grown stronger. The Vengeance Fleet was now a real force. Captain Mike could feel the shift in the air, a sense of hope returning to Earth. The people, though battered, were no longer afraid. They were ready to fight back, and that gave Captain Mike the strength he needed to lead them. Sir, Lieutenant Emma said, her voice focused as she stood beside Captain Mike in the command center. We've received reports from the front lines. Our attacks are starting to make an impact. The Xalarian forces are being stretched thin. They're not as confident as they were before. Captain Mike looked over the data. It showed that Earth's forces were striking in new ways, small but damaging hits. They had begun attacking Xalarian supply lines, damaging weapons stores, and even ambushing isolated patrols. Each strike was a reminder to the Xalarians that they weren't invincible. We need to keep this momentum, Captain Mike said, a hint of determination in his voice. "We can't let them regroup. We hit them now while they're still reeling." On the ground, Earth's forces had also started making strides. Guerrilla tactics were proving effective. Alex, the former naval strategist, had been leading raids in enemy-held cities, causing confusion and panic. His team had even managed to disable a few Accelarian communication towers, making it harder for the invaders to coordinate their attacks. "We're making them nervous," Alex told his team, a smile crossing his face. "Every time they lose control, they get angrier. And when they get angry, they make mistakes." But Earth wasn't just relying on ground tactics. Dr. Josh and his team had been working nonstop, analyzing the alien technology they had captured. They had learned a lot from the Solarians' weapon systems, and now they had come up with a plan to turn the tide in Earth's favor. "We've found a weakness," Dr. Josh said one day, excitement in his voice. "The Accelarian ships rely heavily on a specific type of energy shield. If we can get close enough to their fleet and fire this new weapon we've designed, we can disable their shields temporarily. It'll give us a window to attack their ships directly." The new weapon was a modified version of an energy pulse system, one that Earth's engineers had been working on for months. It wasn't perfect, but it was their best shot, and the Vengeance fleet was ready to try it. Rachel, the young engineer, had helped design the weapon. She was nervous but determined. "It's untested, Captain," she warned as she handed over the final plans. "It might not work, and we could lose everything." Captain Mike nodded, understanding her fears. "But if we don't try, we'll lose everything anyway." As the fleet prepared to launch their next mission, tension filled the air. It was the kind of mission that could either turn the war in their favor or end it all. The Vengeance fleet would move in close to the heart of the Accelarian fleet, risking everything to fire the new weapon and disable their shields. "This is it," Lieutenant Emma said, looking at Captain Mike. "If this works, we might finally have a chance to win." Captain Mike gave a firm nod. "We don't have another option. We either succeed or humanity falls. We fight for Earth, for our people, and for everything we've lost." The battle began in the cold vacuum of space, far from Earth's atmosphere. The Vengeance fleet moved stealthily, carefully avoiding detection by the Accelarian ships. Captain Mike's hands were steady on the controls as his fleet crept closer to the enemy. At the right moment, they launched the new weapon. A bright pulse of energy shot from one of the fleet's lead ships, cutting through space. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. But then, the Accelarian ship's shields flickered and went down. "We've done it," Dr. Josh shouted, his voice filled with relief. "All ships, attack," Captain Mike commanded. With the Accelarian shields disabled, Earth's fleet attacked with everything they had. Explosions filled the void as ships collided in the chaos of battle. The tide had finally turned. The Accelarians, who had once seemed unstoppable, were now on the defensive. They had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back, and it was costing them. Alex's ground forces also joined the fray, launching a final assault on the Solarian Ground Command Center. The resistance had struck at the heart of the enemy, and there was no turning back now. Captain Mike watched as the battle unfolded, his heart racing. It was far from over, but for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that humanity might actually win. They had faced impossible odds, and yet they were still standing. "We fight for Earth," Captain Mike whispered to himself, "and we'll keep fighting until the very end." The victory was sweet, but it was also short-lived. The Accelarians, once overconfident, now realized that they were no longer the only force in the galaxy. Earth's resistance was stronger than they had ever imagined, and they weren't going to back down. But the Accelarians weren't ready to give up just yet. In the command center aboard Earth's flagship, Captain Mike stood with Lieutenant Emma, staring at the screen that displayed the latest reports. The battle was far from over. The Vengeance fleet had scored a huge victory, but now the Accelarian fleet was preparing to retaliate, and this time they wouldn't be caught off guard. "They're coming," Lieutenant Emma said, her eyes narrowing. "The Xalarians have regrouped. They've repaired their shields and adapted their weapons. They're sending everything they've got at us." Captain Mike felt a chill run down his spine. The Xalarians had been ruthless before, but now they were angry. And when enemies like them got angry, they fought harder. "We need to prepare," Captain Mike said, his voice firm. "It's going to get worse before it gets better." The Xalarians launched their counteroffensive without hesitation. Their massive ships surged toward Earth's defenses, and the battle began anew. Captain Mike's fleet was ready, but the Xalarians had learned from their earlier mistakes. This time, their tactics were more coordinated, and their weapons were deadlier than ever. The first wave of the Xalarian attack hit the outer defense line hard. Explosions rocked the space around Earth as the enemy fleet fired relentlessly. Despite the damage, Earth's ships fought back with everything they had. The new weapon developed by Dr. Josh and Rachel had given them a fighting chance, but now the Xalarians were using countermeasures to protect their shields, and the weapon wasn't as effective as it had been before. "We need to think fast," Lieutenant Emma said, looking at Captain Mike with worry. "The Xalarians are too strong. If we don't find a way to break their defense, we'll lose everything we've gained." Captain Mike clenched his fists, his mind racing. He couldn't let humanity fall now, not after everything they had fought for. But it wasn't just about military strength anymore. It was about outthinking the enemy. "Send out a small strike force," Captain Mike ordered. "We'll hit their command ships directly. If we can take out their leaders, we can cause confusion and break their coordination. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Lieutenant Emma nodded. "I'll lead the mission." The strike force was small, but it was fast. They moved quickly, using the cover of debris and damaged ships to hide their approach. The mission was dangerous. There were no guarantees that they would return, but they didn't have a choice. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, the people were fighting just as hard. Alex and his ground teams had been disrupting the Xalarian occupation forces in the cities. Their guerrilla tactics were making a difference, but as the Xalarians pushed back, it became clear that the battle on the ground was also far from over. "Stay strong," Alex shouted to his troops as they prepared for another ambush. "We may be outnumbered, but we have something they don't: our will to fight. We can't let them take our planet." The ground forces continued their resistance, launching surprise attacks, sabotaging enemy supply lines, and doing whatever they could to slow down the Xalarian forces. Back in space, the small strike force led by Lieutenant Emma approached their target. The Xalarian command ship. It was heavily guarded, but the Earth fleet had the advantage of surprise. They attacked with precision, focusing all their firepower on the ship's weak points. The enemy didn't expect such an aggressive assault. "We've breached their defenses," Lieutenant Emma shouted into her communicator. "Prepare for the next phase." They boarded the Xalarian command ship, fighting their way through enemy soldiers. Every step was a battle, but they pushed forward, determined to take control of the ship's systems. Finally, Lieutenant Emma reached the control room. She quickly disabled the ship's central command unit, sending a signal back to Earth's fleet to disrupt the Xalarian forces' coordination. For a moment, the Xalarian fleet lost its strength. The chaos was enough to give Earth's ships the upper hand, but it didn't last long. The Xalarian leadership quickly regrouped, and their retaliation came fast and hard. "We've got a chance, but we can't hold out forever," Captain Mike said as he watched the battle unfold. "We need to strike back and end this." Despite the fierce counterattack, Earth's forces refused to surrender. They fought with everything they had, never forgetting the price of freedom. The Xalarian fleet was still a threat, but the people of Earth had shown that they would not be easily defeated. The battle for Earth had reached its peak. The Xalarian fleet, after a short period of disarray, had recovered and was once again attacking with full force. The Vengeance fleet, though weakened, had not given up. But the fight had taken its toll. Every ship, every soldier, Every fighter knew that this might be their last stand. Captain Mike stood at the command center, his face grim as he watched the displays. The Xalarians had pushed through their defenses and were now advancing toward Earth's atmosphere. If they succeeded, they would destroy everything. "They're getting closer," Lieutenant Emma said, her voice filled with tension. "If we don't stop them now, it's over." Captain Mike clenched his fists. He had never imagined that humanity would be pushed this far. The Vengeance fleet had done everything they could. The resistance on the ground had fought bravely, but they had not been able to turn the tide completely in their favor. "We have one chance," Captain Mike said, his eyes narrowing as he turned to Dr. Josh. "Do we have that new weapon ready?" Dr. Josh nodded. "We've modified the weapon again. This time, it's designed to disable their fleet's core systems. If we can get it to their flagship, we can take down their entire fleet." Rachel, the young engineer, spoke up. "It's risky. We don't know if it'll work on such a large scale, and the flagship is heavily guarded. We'll be walking into a trap." "I know," Captain Mike replied. "But it's the only shot we have left. If we don't try, humanity loses." Lieutenant Emma was already preparing the mission. "We'll move fast. We have to catch them off guard again. If we fail, Earth doesn't have another chance." The Vengeance fleet launched their final assault, diving straight into the heart of the Xalarian fleet. The tension was unbearable. Every ship felt the weight of the moment as they powered toward the enemy's flagship, the giant vessel that controlled the entire Xalarian force. As they approached, the Xalarian ships began to fire. Explosions lit up the space around them, but the Earth fleet kept going, weaving through the blasts and focusing on their target. The stakes had never been higher. "We've reached the flagship." Lieutenant Emma's voice rang out over the communication channel. "We're moving in. Prepare for the final push." The Earth fleet concentrated their firepower on the flagship's defenses. It wasn't enough to destroy the massive ship, but it was enough to create an opening. Lieutenant Emma led the charge, flying her ship through the gap in the Xalarian shields and heading straight for the core systems. Inside the flagship, the Xalarians were scrambling. They hadn't expected such an aggressive attack. But the humans were determined. Lieutenant Emma's ship dodged another barrage of fire and closed in on the target. "We're almost there." Lieutenant Emma shouted, "Prepare the weapon." The final weapon, designed by Dr. Josh and Rachel, was a powerful energy pulse that could disable the entire fleet if it was deployed correctly. But it was a one-shot weapon. If they missed, there would be no second chance. "Deploying the weapon now," Lieutenant Emma said, activating the pulse. For a moment, nothing happened. The crew held their breath, waiting. Then, a massive shockwave rippled through the space around them. The flagship's shields faltered, and the ship's core systems began to fail. The energy pulse had worked. The Xalarian fleet was no longer coordinated. Ships began to lose power, their movements sluggish and disorganized. "We did it," Lieutenant Emma yelled over the comms. But even with the Xalarian fleet in disarray, the battle wasn't over. The remaining Xalarian ships fought desperately, knowing this was their last chance to end humanity's resistance. They tried to regroup, but the damage was already done. Earth's fleet launched a final wave of attacks, finishing off the Xalarian ships one by one. On the ground, the resistance fighters were still battling, but they could see the change. The Xalarians were retreating. The ground forces, led by Alex, pushed forward, destroying Xalarian supply lines and weakening their grip on Earth's cities. The battle in space raged on, but the tides had turned. The Vengeance fleet had struck a fatal blow to the Xalarian forces. The flagship, now crippled, could no longer command its fleet, and the remaining Xalarian ships began to retreat. Captain Mike, watching the final moments of the battle, allowed himself a moment of hope. It wasn't over yet, but the Xalarians had been beaten back. Humanity had proven its strength, its resilience, and its refusal to be destroyed. "We've won," Lieutenant Emma said quietly, her voice filled with disbelief. Captain Mike nodded slowly. Not yet, but we will. As the last of the Solarian ships turned and fled, Captain Mike looked out at the stars. Earth was still standing. The battle had been long and brutal, but humanity had not only survived, it had fought back, and it had won. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. As the last of the Solarian ships fled, the remnants of Earth's fleet drifted through the vast emptiness of space. Their victory was a hard-earned one, but the cost had been high. Many ships were lost, many lives taken. There was no time to celebrate. Captain Mike stood on the bridge of the flagship, staring out at the stars. The fleet had won, but it felt hollow. The damage to their forces was significant, and the loss of crew members weighed heavily on his heart. "Report," Captain Mike said, his voice low but steady. Lieutenant Emma was at her station, her face grim as she looked at the data coming in. "We've lost a third of our ships, sir. The rest are damaged. We'll need time to repair." Mike nodded slowly. He knew this wasn't the end, but the next phase of the fight would be even more challenging. The Solarian fleet was in retreat, but they were still dangerous. The war wasn't over. They had only won a battle. "Tell the ground forces we'll need their help. We're going to need all the resources we can get to rebuild," Captain Mike ordered. "And get Dr. Josh to the command center. I need his analysis on how we move forward from here." Lieutenant Emma nodded and moved to relay the orders. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, the Resistance was celebrating their own hard-earned victory. Alex and his team had pushed the Solarian forces out of most major cities, but there was still work to do. The Solarians had occupied Earth for far too long, and there were pockets of resistance still holding strong. Earth's people were weary, but they had fought bravely. Now, they were focused on rebuilding. Alex stood in the center of a crowded room with his fellow resistance leaders. "We've done it. We've driven them out of most cities," he said, his voice full of pride. "But we still need to stay vigilant. The Solarians won't leave without a fight. We can't afford to let our guard down." One of the leaders spoke up. "What about the fleet? Will they come back for another attack?" "They might," Alex replied. "But we got time now. Time to rebuild and fortify Earth. They've underestimated us before. Let's make sure they never make that mistake again." Back in space, Captain Mike met with Dr. Josh in the command center, the weight of the past few days heavy on both of them. "We need to act fast," Dr. Josh said, tapping the holographic screen in front of him. "While the Solarians are retreating, they're still a threat. We don't know if they'll regroup and come back stronger, or if they'll try to launch one final attack. We can't afford to sit back." Captain Mike crossed his arms, thinking hard. "We're running low on resources. We need time to repair our ships and get our fleet back to full strength. But we can't just sit here waiting for them to come back. What do you suggest?" Dr. Josh hesitated, then spoke. "We have a chance to strike at the Solarian homeworld. If we can destroy their central command, it could break their ability to continue the war. It's risky, but it might be the only way to end this once and for all." Captain Mike's eyes sharpened. The homeworld. If we can take out their leadership, we could stop this war right here, right now. But Dr. Josh warned, it will take time to gather the necessary forces, and their homeworld will be heavily protected. We'll need more than just our fleet. We'll need support from the ground as well. "I'll send word to Alex," Captain Mike said. "If we can work together, we might have a shot." As Captain Mike prepared to send out the orders, Lieutenant Emma came in with more news. "We've received word from the remaining Solarian forces," she said. "They're organizing a last-ditch effort to defend their homeworld. They know they're on the brink of defeat, and they'll do anything to hold on." Captain Mike looked at her with resolve. "Then we'll hit them hard and fast. We'll take the fight to them before they can regroup." The crew on the flagship quickly worked to prepare for the next phase of the war. Repairs on the fleet began immediately, but everyone knew that time was running out. The Solarian forces wouldn't stay down for long. It was now or never. On Earth, Alex and the Resistance fighters continued their work, setting up defenses and preparing for any future attacks. Their determination was unmatched. They had fought back once, and they would do it again. "We may be exhausted, but we can't stop," Alex said as he addressed his troops. "We'll help the fleet, and together, we'll finish this war. For Earth. For our future." The time had come. The last phase of the war was about to begin. Earth's fleet was fully repaired, and the resistance on the ground had fortified its defenses. The Xelarian forces, though weakened, were still dangerous, and their homeworld remained the key to ending the war once and for all. Captain Mike knew they had only one chance. "We can't afford any mistakes," Captain Mike said, his voice firm as he stood in the command center. He looked around at his officers and crew. The tension in the room was thick, but there was also a sense of determination. This was it, the final assault. Dr. Josh entered the room, holding a datapad. "We've analyzed the Xelarian homeworld's defenses. It's heavily guarded, but we've identified weak points. If we strike fast and hit them where it hurts, we can break their command structure." Lieutenant Emma stepped forward. "We're ready. We've gathered a fleet of our best ships, and the Resistance is supporting us from the ground. We can make this work." Captain Mike nodded. "We won't stop until their leadership is gone. This is our last chance to finish what we started." In the command center, everyone was ready. The final assault would be a combined effort. The Vengeance fleet in space, and the Resistance on Earth. They knew the risks, but there was no turning back. As Earth's fleet jumped into hyperspace, they prepared for what would be the most dangerous mission of their lives. The journey to the Xelarian homeworld would take several days, but every moment felt like a lifetime. The crew spent the time running simulations and preparing strategies for the attack. On Earth, Alex and the Resistance fighters were ready for their part. Their mission was to weaken the Xelarian defenses on the surface and give Earth's fleet a chance to break through. Alex gathered his team. "We've fought long and hard," Alex said to his troops, standing in front of a map of the Xelarian strongholds. "Now it's time to finish it. Our goal is to hit them hard, create chaos, and buy the fleet the time they need to strike. We take out their communication centers, supply lines, and military bases. Every attack counts." The Resistance members nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They had nothing left to lose. They would fight until the very end. Back in space, Captain Mike's fleet neared the Xelarian homeworld. As they came out of hyperspace, the sight of the massive planet loomed before them, surrounded by a fleet of defending ships. The Xelarian homeworld was heavily protected, and the defenses were stronger than anything they had faced so far. "There it is," Lieutenant Emma said, her voice steady but with a hint of awe. "The Xelarian homeworld. Heavily guarded. We'll need to break through their outer defenses before we can reach their capital." Captain Mike looked at the planet, his face hardening. "We'll do whatever it takes, no matter the cost." The first wave of attacks came fast. The Earth fleet fired on the outer defense lines, launching everything they had. Explosions lit up the space around them, and the Xelarian ships retaliated with full force. The battle was fierce, but Earth's fleet pressed on, refusing to back down. As the fleet fought their way through the defense lines, Lieutenant Emma led a small strike team toward the Xelarian capital. They dodged blasts and moved quickly, focusing on disabling the most critical systems. The pressure was unbearable, but they were determined. The fleet's success depended on this mission. "We're almost there," Lieutenant Emma called out as her ship flew toward the heart of the Xelarian capital. The enemy fire was intense, but they managed to break through. Meanwhile, on the ground, Alex and his team had infiltrated a Xelarian military base. They moved quickly, planting explosives and sabotaging the enemy's weapons. The sound of explosions echoed in the distance as they fought their way through, distracting the enemy and weakening their defenses. "We're making progress," Alex said, panting, as he looked at his team. Let's keep going. Back in space, the strike team made it to the Xalarian Central Command building. Lieutenant Emma led the charge as they fought their way through the defenses. Their goal was clear: disable the command systems and cripple the Xalarian leadership once and for all. With one final push, Lieutenant Emma's team reached the command center and planted the last of the charges. "This is it," she said, breathing heavily. "Once this is set off, it'll be over for them." As the charges detonated, the entire Xalarian command structure collapsed. The fleet's coordination was shattered, and the Xalarian forces began to falter. The resistance on the ground had already caused chaos, and now the fleet finished what was left. "We've won," Captain Mike said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The war is over." The remaining Xalarian ships, disorganized and leaderless, were quickly defeated. Earth's fleet had succeeded in their mission, and the resistance had brought the fight to the surface. Alex, standing among his team, smiled. "We did it. We've taken back our planet." As the last of the Xalarian ships retreated, Earth's people began to rebuild, knowing that they had defeated the greatest threat to their survival. It had been a long and hard fight, but humanity had proven that when pushed to the brink, they would fight back, and they would win.